and welcome to the Introduction to Indian Philosophy series, and we'll discuss the schools of Buddhism today. In the previous two lectures on Buddhism, I discussed the basic teachings of Buddhism. These basic teachings come under the title of Early Buddhism. These teachings were accepted by all Buddhist philosophers irrespective of the group which they belonged to. Group? What group? I want to make one thing clear, that a lot happened after the death of Buddha. So, Buddhism is not just about anitya, anatma and dukkha. There is much more to it. Buddha had enemies while he was alive, and they deliberately used to disobey his instructions and completely disregard him. And one example is Buddha's own cousin, Devdatta. Buddha neither laid any rules nor appointed any monk as the head to take charge of the Sangha after his death. He rather insisted that after him his dharma or dhamma would be the guide for his disciples and followers. So, it was left to the disciples and followers to interpret the Dhamma on their own. But we know the general tendency of people, their whims and fancies, their tight grasp of ego on their wisdom, their self-interest, narrow thinking, and sticking to convenience and a like-minded set of people. Now, all these factors led to the division of the early Buddhism into different groups. I must also add that these groups were formed also on the basis of worshipping or extolling Buddha, as milder forms of austerities were given allowance. Also, those who followed his teachings had formed settled communities in different locations. The growth and geographical dispersion led to inevitable changes in their methods of both teaching and practices. As the number of members grew, the institutional organization increased its complexity. Monks expanded and elaborated both doctrine and disciplinary codes, created new textual genres, developed new forms of disciplines, and eventually divided into a number of different schools. Soon after the death of Buddha, in 400 BCE, during the reign of King Ajatashatru, a meeting of about 500 Buddhist monks was held in Rajagriha. This was probably 3 months after Buddha's passing away. This meeting happened under the supervision of Mahakashyapa, who was one of the favorite disciples of Buddha. And the purpose of the meeting was to assimilate Buddha's teachings and give it the shape of a text. So, the three Pitakas in Pali language were arranged. Ananda and Upali, who were the closest disciples of Buddha and were endowed with extraordinary memory, recited the Sutta, which are the discourses of Buddha, and the Vinaya, which form the discipline formulated by the Buddha in the meeting. However, no discussion on Dhamma, which relates to the psychophysical principles of the universe, took place. There was no doubt or debate regarding the Sutta or the discourses of the Buddha. However, some apprehensions were considered about the Vinaya, which is the discipline formulated by the Buddha. It is believed that Buddha, before attaining parinirvana, had told Ananda that after his passing away, if the Sangha wished to make some minor changes in the discipline or rules, then they could do so. But that time, Ananda was so grievously disturbed by the approaching death of Buddha that he could not clarify about what rules could be amended. So, Mahakashyapa, along with other senior monks, decided not to make any changes in the discipline. Some senior monks like Purana did not attend that meeting, presupposing that what would be discussed would not be in accordance with what they had heard from the Buddha. Then again, 100 years after the death of Buddha, in 383 BCE, a second meeting happened in Vaishali during the reign of King Kalashoka. I will now briefly tell you the context of the meeting, which ultimately led to a split between the monks from the eastern region of India and the monks from the western region of India. Many monks gathered in Vaishali to settle a dispute regarding some 10 rules of the Vinaya Pitaka. Monks from the eastern region like Vaishali wanted to bring about some changes in the rules, while the monks from the western regions like Avanti and Kaushambi, who wanted to stick to the Vinaya rules compiled during the first meeting, rejected those changes. And thus a split happened, and two groups were formed: those who wanted to bring in reforms and rise above the conservative approach were called the Mahasanghikas or Universal Assembly, and the ones who wanted to stick to the old practices were labeled as Sthaviravadins or Theravadins, as the word Sthavira or Thera means old or original. The disagreements between the Mahasanghikas and the Sthaviravadins were many. For example, the Mahasanghikas give transcendent power to the Buddhas, which the Sthaviravadins completely refuted. The Sthaviravadins believed that the Buddha can proffer a whole doctrine in just a single utterance, and what they utter cannot be taken as the absolute truth. They also believe that during concentration, neither can one utter a word nor can one die. But these beliefs were completely refuted by the Mahasanghikas. For the Mahasanghikas, the Buddhas are endowed with the ability to think and respond quickly and effectively. They can effortlessly, in an oversimplified manner, answer all questions. Their speech is always perfect. They are beyond sleep or dream. Also, the Bodhisattvas are superior to the Arhats, as they possess miraculous powers and are full of compassion. Then, again in 250 BCE, during the reign of King Ashoka, a third meeting of the monks was held at Patliputra. In this meeting again, an attempt was made to settle the disputes regarding the Vinaya Pitaka. Also, Abhidhamma Pitaka was formally included in the Buddhist texts, and thus the three Pitakas, namely the Sutta Pitaka, Vinaya Pitaka and the Abhidhamma Pitaka, were recognized in the Buddhist tradition. It is believed that Mogaliputta Tissa, the monk under whose supervision the meeting or the third meeting took place, compiled the book Kathavattu as a result of this meeting. Also, a new Buddhist school of thought called Vibhajyavada, which means thesis of distinction, was recognized as the official Buddhist school of thought. But this did not stop Buddhism from further getting divided into various subgroups as Buddhism began to spread across the whole of India and beyond. Naturally, new customs and practices were to be accommodated. And so, after this third meeting, Buddhism was divided into 18 groups. The Mahasanghikas, over a period in the 2nd century BCE, broke into 8 subgroups. They were Eka-Vyāhārikas, Lokottaravadins, Gokulikas, Bahushrutiyas, Pragyaptivadins, Chaityashailas, Aparashailas, and Uttarashailas. The Sthaviravadins, either during the 3rd century or after the 3rd century BCE, broke into 2 groups. 1. Hemavatas, and 2. Sarvastivadins. The Sarvastivadins were later further divided into 5 subgroups, namely Vastiputriyas, Mahishasakas, Dharmaguptikas, Kasyapiyas, and Sautrantikas. Now, among these, the Vastuputriyas were further divided into 4, namely Dharmottariyas, Bhadrayanikas, Samattiyas, and Sannagarikas. So, of these 18-19 groups, some got popular and developed their own literature, while others disappeared with time. It is believed that among some of the subgroups of the Sarvastivadins, the prevalent language was Sanskrit. The Mahasanghikas, however, used Prakrit language for communication. However, later, perhaps due to some sort of influence of Sarvastivadins on the Mahasanghikas adopted Sanskrit as their official language. Now, the Sthaviravadins were gradually losing popularity and were being dominated by the Sarvastivadins. And the main task of the Sarvastivadins was to reject the views of the Mahasanghikas. These Sarvastivadins were hardcore realists, as is evident from the claim that the school derived its name from the phrase Sabbam Atti, which means everything exists. So, if we study the school, we will find that they attributed not just existence but also continuity of existence to all things and their dharmas. So, the past, the present, and the future have real existence for them, but they believed in anatma as well. So, an individual, according to them, is devoid of a permanent self. According to them, apart from the Skandhas, the Ayatanas, and the Dhatus, there exist 75 other elements or dharmas in the universe. And of these 75 elements, 72 are Samskrita dharmas, which are conditioned or compound elements, and 3 are Asamskrita dharmas, which are the uncompounded elements, and they are Akasha, which is space, Pratisankhya Nirodha or cessation through knowledge, and Apratisankhya Nirodha or cessation through the disappearance of the requisite conditions. The 72 Samskrita dharmas include 11 types of rupa or matter, 1 chitta, which is mind, 46 mental faculties, and 14 non-mental faculties, which are basically potential energies. So, for the Sarvastivadins, the universe is pervaded with these elements only, which are either mental or material. The material elements take care of the external world, while the mental elements relate to the individual. And these elements making the external world and the individual are constantly changing. The past determining the present and the present determining the future. The Haimavata school, on the other hand, was dominant only in the Himalayan region. In fact, when the Sarvastivadins branched out of the Sthaviravada school, the Sthaviravadins were regarded as Haimavatas. Although not much is known about this school, but it is claimed that, like the Sarvastivadins, the Haimavatas believed that the Bodhisattva are ordinary men who do not enjoy any fame or superiority within the group. But at the same time, they refuted the Sarvastivadin claim that gods can follow brahmacharya. Now let us move to the next one. Remember the Orthodox Purana who did not attend the first meeting called under the supervision of Mahakashyapa? It was his disciples who formed the group by the name Mahishāsakas. They branched off from the Sarvastivadins because they opposed the Sarvastivadin claims like arhats may fall back to their earlier stage, or gods can follow brahmacharya. So the Mahishāsakas were divided into two groups based on time and were called the earlier Mahishāsakas and the later Mahishāsakas. They believed only in 5 practices of Noble Eightfold Path, and they excluded right speech, right action, and right livelihood from the list and considered these as material states. The earlier Mahishāsakas believed in the existence of the present as well as the asamskrita dharmas and rejected the existence of the past and the future and even the samskaras. The later Mahishāsakas, however, gave credence to the past and the future and maintained that the Skandhas, the ayatanas and the dhatus always exist in the seed form. Then comes the school of Vatsiputriyas. This school was founded by the orthodox monk Vatsiputra and remained quite popular for about 1000 years. It was based on Anatmavad, yet it asserted the existence of a permanent entity called Pudgala, which accounted for karma, rebirth and nirvana. According to them, it is Pudgala which is subjected to transmigration from one life to another and ultimately experiences nirvana. A person carries the 5 aggregates or skandhas, and this carrying leads to craving and suffering. Now look at this slide. The 5 aggregates are truly burdens. The burden carrier is the person. Taking up the burden is suffering in the world. Laying the burden down is blissful. They accepted some of the Sarvastivadin claims, like for example, that arhats can fall back to their earlier stage and lose their arhatship, and that heretics can also attain miraculous powers. The reason why its sub-schools, namely Dharmottariyas, Bhadrayanikas and Sannagarikas emerged out of it was that these sub-schools did not accept their views on arhatship. Now the 4th sub-school of Vatsiputriyas was Samittiyas. and it in fact excelled far better than any other sub-school of Vatsiputriyas. For that matter, it even eclipsed the popularity of its parent school. Like the Mahishāsakas, they accepted only 5 practices of the Noble Eightfold Path. Then comes the sub-school that emerged from the Mahishāsakas, and it is called Dharmaguptaka. Etymologically speaking, it means preserver of laws or dharma. It spread extensively in Central Asia and China. It differs from its parent school on some minor points. For example, whether gifts should be given to the Sangha or to the Buddha alone. According to them, the Buddha's teachings are divided into 12 parts, and they are Sutra, Geya, Vyakarana, Gatha, Udana, Nidana, Jataka, Iti Vrittaka, Vaipulya, Adbhuta Dharma, Avadana and Upadesha. So, where sutra means an aphorism or a set of aphorisms, Geya means a poem, Vyakarana means grammar, Gatha means to extol praises in verse or in a poetic meter. Udana refers to the Buddhist scripture, which consists of 80 inspiring utterances. Nidana here refers to the 12 nidanas or causes described by Buddha in the doctrine of dependent origination. Jataka are the stories of the former lives of Buddha. Iti Vrittakas are the stories of the lives of saints or arhats. Vaipulya means elaboration of the sutras. Adbhuta Dharma refers to the miraculous and supernatural events. Avadana means noble deeds, and thus in the Buddhist context it refers to the Buddha's explanation of events relating to a person's good deeds in his previous life. Now Upadesha refers to the instructions given by the Buddha. Then comes the sub-school by the name Kashyapiyas, which branched off from the Sarvastivadins on some issues sometimes around 190 BCE. However, they still had affiliation with their principal Sthaviravadin school, and so they were also known by the name Sthavariyas. But definitely they had their own literature and doctrines which show how they made alterations to the Sarvastivadin position. To give you an example, the Kashyapiyas, unlike the Sarvastivadins, maintained that the past which has delivered its fruit ceases to exist, whereas the past which has not yet delivered its fruit yet still exists in the present in some form. And like the Sarvastivadins, they believed that arhats can fall back to their earlier stage and lose their arhatship. Now I'll talk about the last sub-school that emerged from the Sarvastivadin school, and it is called Sautrantika. Now it is called Sautrantika because it is because of its complete reliance on the sutras. They opposed the authority given to the Abhidhamma. It is believed that Kumara Labdha was the founder of this system, and he is the author of the book Drishtant Pankti. So the Sautrantikas were also known by the name Darshtantikas. Another great exponent of this school is Sri Labdha, who was the teacher of Vasubandhu, which is a popular name in the Buddhist tradition. As far as their doctrine is concerned, they believed quite in opposition to the Samityas, that only the Skandhas in their subtle form transmigrate from one world to another. To put it more clearly, the 5 Skandhas, according to them, comprised of 4 Mulantika Skandhas and 1 Ekrasa Skandha. Now this Ekrasa Skandha, which is the subtle consciousness, gives rise to the 4 Moolantika Skandhas, and in fact it is this Ekrasa Skandha that transmigrates from one world to another. One more important point of their doctrine is that for them, any ordinary man has the capacity and capability of becoming a Buddha. Some of these beliefs of the Sautrantikas fall in line with those of the Mahasanghikas. As I mentioned before, that the Mahasanghikas were divided into 8 groups. In the first split division, the 3 groups that emerged out of the Mahasanghikas were Eka-Vyāhārikas, the Lokottaravadins, and the Gokulikas. Some believe that this split was due to some disagreement over the acceptance or rejection of some texts. Primarily, the three are indistinguishable as far as the doctrines are concerned. Their views can be captured in the following words. You can view the slide. The Buddha is equipped with the following supernatural qualities: transcendence, lack of defilements, all of his utterances preaching his teaching, expounding all his teachings in a single utterance, all of his sayings being true, his physical body being limitless, his power being limitless, the length of his life being limitless, never tiring of enlightening sentient beings and awakening pure faith in them, having no sleep or dreams, no pause in answering a question, and always in meditation. From the Gokulikas emerged 2 groups, namely Bahushrutiyas and Pragyaptivadins. The Bahushrutiyas, as the name suggests, were considered the much heard school. About them it is said, and you can view in the slide, broadly studying the 3 Pitaka and profoundly comprehending the Buddha's words, it is by these virtues that they are referred to by the name the Bahushrutiya sect. They regarded the teachings of Buddha on impermanence, emptiness, suffering, absence of any permanent entity, and the calmness of nirvana as transcendent, while the rest of the teachings are this worldly in nature. Now see the next slide and you will know the views of Pragyaptivadins. Now the Pragyaptivadins believed that except in the case of the 5 skandhas or the constituents of a being, the dharmas have no real existence. The 12 ayatanas and the 18 dhatus are temporary or unreal. Both the attainment of noble path and untimely death are the result of karma, and once the noble path is attained, it cannot be lost. Now I'll discuss the last 3 groups under the Mahasanghikas. They are the Chaitya Shailas, the Apara Shailas, and the Uttara Shailas. These schools held the view that even the Bodhisattvas are within the confines of evil destiny. Also, that one does not gain any merit by making offerings to stupas. But there are other interesting things which are known about these sub-schools and which come very close to the Upanishadic views. For example, the view that everything has its own nature, and which implies that the fundamental nature remains the same despite the changes occurring in the body. Also, consciousness is not momentary. Now, these are some controversial views. So you can see that Buddhism as a system of thought has witnessed and sustained a lot of transformations and developments which resulted in the emergence or proliferation of divergent views and sub-schools. This much for this lecture. I'll see you later and discuss the 4th council. Thank you.